Okay, and we are back. Thank you all for joining us for the second Altered Spaces from ASM, where we deep dive topics related to gaming, artificial intelligence, and Web3. I'm your host, Genesis Bryan, Community Manager at Altered State Machine, and I'm super pumped for today's guests, who will be discussing how AI is revolutionizing the creative industry. As is becoming evident by the exponential growth of many AI tools, AI is no longer just for scientists and researchers. It's quickly becoming an essential tool for creators as well. With AI, creators can generate new ideas, automate tedious tasks, and even create entirely new works of art. And as AI continues to evolve and become more accessible, it's changing the way that creators create. But while AI has enormous potential, it also raises some important questions. How can we ensure that AI isn't sourcing from artists who don't want AI models trained with their art? What impact will AI have on the future of work for creative professionals? And will creators be out of a job in the long run? Today, we'll be discussing these crucial topics and hearing from experts with the hope that this conversation will shed some light on the impact that AI will have on the creative industry as a whole. And at the end, time permitting, we'll bring some of you guys up from the audience to join in on the conversation. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you all to go ahead and like and share this spaces on Twitter and help spread the love. All right, with business out of the way, time to welcome our guests. Joining us today are David McDonald, CEO of Altered State Machine. How are you doing today, David?
Not bad. How you doing yourself?
Not too bad. A little tired, but doing great overall. Um, Next up, we have Dylan. Dylan is the founder and CEO of Shadows Interactive and co-creator of Party Bears. Dylan's other recent endeavors included product marketing at EA, representing talented creators at the Creative Arts Agency, and investing in early-stage startups. He's currently one of the VPs of Creative at Futureverse. So welcome to the stage, Dylan. Happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
Awesome. And last but not least, we have Beleevens. Beleevens' first interaction with AI came as a voice user interface designer on smart speakers back in 2016. He later co-founded his own agency focused on entrepreneurship as a service. He has spent a lot of time in the Web3 space working with AI tools and is a large contributor to the wider Futureverse community. Welcome, Believens. Thanks so much for joining us. I know it's late where you are, so we appreciate you staying up to hang out with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really glad to be here. And yes, it's midnight, but definitely don't want to miss that space.
I love your
Thanks, man.
your Cool Cats PFP too. Awesome. All right. Well, I want to get right into the topic at hand by kind of just giving a background for each of you, asking about your experiences to give us some context for today's discussion. So, can each of you kind of maybe walk through different use cases or ways in which you use AI to enhance your creative endeavors?
Should I kick off this one, or who
Yeah,
wants to
go
go
for it.
first? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm by like my profession is a UX designer, so lots of like concepts, websites, as you mentioned already back in 2017. I did voice user interface design, and coming from that area of designing personas, like how does a voice assistant respond? There was definitely already like the first nuances of AI coming into the field, and now with ChatGPT, I think even just recently, like yesterday, I was at a family event, and someone who like a policeman was like, "Oh yeah, like." What it's called, like ChatGPT, when I just mentioned AI, and he was already like he knew about it, and that was really fascinating to me that um, that this topic is now like yeah already reached like the masses. It feels like, and I think like there like with ChatGPT, the opportunities are endless. I also used Midjourney to generate images for like be it presentations, be it for inspiration, product design. Like there, it's endless opportunities in my opinion. And so yeah, I think like I'm wondering if there's any field that won't be touched by it. So yeah, I think really exciting.
Hmm. I don't think there will be any field that's not touched by it. To be honest, and I've been actually, so I've been using the tools that we've been researching and developing internally myself for a little bit. I know I'm not, it's technically on the creative side, but it's helped with concepting things, creating complex things that I don't have the expertise to create, like textures and concept art for different things that I'm coming up with, and even our version of Futureverse GPT. I've been playing around with to help write code. So um, yeah, it's definitely useful tools for creative purposes, even for the non-creative people.
Yeah, and I'm happy to jump in on my side. I've always been obsessed with the question of how do we make storytelling more cost effective, and how do we enable more people to tell more stories at a higher quality scale too. That's what brought me to animation, a little over a decade ago, because animation is computer generated stories at its purest form. And as computers rapidly evolved and we started seeing things like Pixar's Render Man and the beautiful animation coming from Silicon Valley, I knew kind of what was coming. And then, about 5 years ago, I started a real time animation studio focused entirely on animating and telling pre rendered stories inside game engine render engines like Unreal and Unity. And then a couple of years ago, we started seeing what's coming even further with AI and Dolly, Stable Diffusion, and Midjourney. And that since changed the way we do pre-production and pre-visualization. So we are hell bent on lowering the cost and the entry to animation and storytelling. And it's a great time to be doing that.
Yeah, that's a really unique perspective, and I actually really loved, David, what you were saying. As a non-creative person myself, I'm more of a spreadsheet numbers data junkie. I think one thing that is cool is this technology is empowering even people who don't consider themselves artistic to kind of get more in touch with their creative side and be able to express that in ways that they weren't able to do. So I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah, it takes out some of the limitations. I mean, you should have seen the first version of AFA um, that I built. It was not very pretty, so let's put it that way. With access to these tools, the leap that I could make on something like that to something that's a bit more presentable would be quite massive in comparison.
Yeah, for sure. I guess this is a question for anyone who wants to jump in there, but what are some of the bigger challenges you've faced when kind of learning to incorporate AI in your creative work?
I think like
Um,
one
yeah.
part. Oh, sorry.
No, go for it. Go for it, B.
Okay. Yeah, I think like one part is to keep track of everything. Like the space is developing so rapidly, from ChatGPT to AutoGPT to I now heard like Chaos GPT. Like it's like the it's so rapidly evolving. Like integrating, like even if you integrate it into your workflow today, tomorrow there's something new coming up, which might be even better. And I think like just keeping up with all things that are developed is probably definitely one of the challenges.
Yeah, I think I'll just adding to that, in the experimental phase, it's really hard to get exactly what you're looking for using some of these AI tools. We're still dealing with things like hallucinations and trying to figure out, I think with Midjourney just now with V5, did they figure out how to do hands the right way? So there's all these edge cases that are really difficult, that were kind of unexpected, but completely can ruin a dissolution of intelligence if it's not done right. So we're not at a point yet where we're starting to use stuff in our production pipeline. That's why, like I said, it's mostly been helping in the pre-production aspects of things.
Yeah, I don't think we're far from that. Um, uh, Personally, I think we're a lot closer to having it unrecognizable from a human hand than we think. Uh, and that's a little bit uncomfortable to hear. I think for the creative community, but you look at the advancement of technology, and you look at what the internet and Google and things like Google has done to be being able to, index all of human knowledge, hasn't has kind of evolved the way that people work in general. Um, and one thing I know for sure is that there's going to be a lot of change and disruption that AI is going to bring to a lot of industries, including the creative industry. But I don't think it should be something that people are worried about, because I think people are still going to need to be involved in the process. But it's just going to open up the doors for more people to get involved in the creative process than currently exists.
Interesting.
I
go
think
ahead.
just to add a bit here, one point on the allowing people that are not artistic to create content, like you mentioned also earlier, David. I think like the differentiation here, which I would make on my end, is I would not consider myself artistic in a way of being able to do like concept art, illustration, drawings, and so on. But I would consider myself as a very creative person, with a good imagination. And now with these tools, like for the first time, I could visualize ideas by just describing them. And I think that is definitely very powerful to give like this artistic ability to express yourself through these tools, even if you're not an illustrator or good in sketching things. And that's like a super powerful tool on my end, which definitely changed how I approach things.
Agreed. We're moving into the augmented human. I suppose we already kind of are augmented humans. We walk around with these computers strapped to us at all times that, again, as I said, contain all the world's knowledge indexed in one location, which kind of makes us, a little bit cyborgs already. And I think the advancement of AI and moving into and be involved more in our daily lives is just going to be an extension of what we kind of already do.
Dylan, were you going to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think to me, art is the process of taking something inside your head, whether it's an emotion, a visual, or a story, and then getting it out into a, digestible form for an audience or the rest of the world, or even just for yourself. And all these tools that are coming out, driven by AI and large language models, that's what they're doing. They're helping us take thoughts, whether we're an artist or not, and put them out and share them with the world. And that's something really exciting and powerful because it means we're going to be getting a lot more art. And typically, with quantity, you'll find quality comes next. So, it takes a lot in order to produce something of quality. So I'm really excited to see about what non-artists can start producing that we will very much consider art as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let me direct a question that David kind of answered to you then, Dylan. So David seems to think that most creatives won't be out of a job in 5 to 10 years. Is that your perspective as well? I know there are a lot of people who are in the broader public are concerned that that's going to be kind of the future and where AI takes us.
Yeah, I think, this is a pretty controversial opinion and maybe a bit pessimistic, but I would frame it more as good artists will not be out of a job. I think whether it's art or any profession, really, you've got about 20% of a workforce or of a group of people that really drive most of the value in that profession. And then a lot of people who are just trying to get by. And that's just the cold reality of it, I think. And I think people who are just maybe skating by doing rote tasks, routine tasks, they might be in more trouble than they'd like to admit. But talented artists will always be in very, very high demand. And if anything, AI is just going to drive more demand for them. So that's how I would frame it.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, even to tack on that, I would also say, even maybe not the most talented artists, but the first to adapt with AI and grow with it are probably also going to be very high in demand. Beleevens, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we will see a general disruption in the overall workforce. It's not limited to creative jobs. While I think like if you look back a few years, the general consensus was yes, AI will and robots might like automate stuff and take our jobs, but the creativity is the last barrier of human of the human mind, and AI won't get there and take away our special creativity. And now we're here, and creatives use it all across the bandwidth of jobs. And yeah, I think like looking back a few years, this was not imaginable. And now that we're at this point, I think the overall workforce will have to adapt. The most important skill is to be able to adapt to new requirements, new circumstances. But it's not like if we compare it to like looking back when Photoshop was introduced, when all these tools came about, creatives also had to change. Like they could not just keep doing print, and so it's always the job of the creative is to learn the tools at hand. So yeah, I think like that's what we will get. And yes, there might be some jobs where which will completely be gone, but I think that's just yeah, the way society works. So yeah.
No, that's true. I think I think the sorry, what was I going to say? Come back to me. I had a good thought and I've just lost it.
I have a question for you, David, actually, because that sparked something. I know you've talked about how like prompt engineers as a job or role probably won't be a thing for very long. Are there any kind of creative type jobs you can see opening up with the dawn of all this new AI technology that we may not have thought of before?
So here's my kind of assessment on it. So at some point, everybody became an expert at Googling, right? It was just something, it became a general thing that you had to be. At some point, everybody had to have computer skills. It used to be a specialized thing where you'd have to have a degree in order to operate a computer. And over time, as computers' usability increased, the user UX increased, then everybody, it's a requirement for everybody in any job that they have. So when I talk about prompt engineer, I think it's going to become like that, where it's going to be part of everybody's job to be able to interface with and work with AI. It's not going to be a specialized job anymore, like it used to be. You don't have computer operators as a job anymore. Everybody is a computer operator. Everybody's a Googler. Um, so, and the pace that AI is advancing, I don't think there's these specialized in prompt engineer roles are going to be around for very long before the tools and the AI get to a point where it understands its user so well that you can describe things in your natural language and it can interpret them correctly. That's essentially the role that you're trying to get a prompt engineer to do, right? Is describe something to that prompt engineer and then have that prompt engineer describe it again to the AI. Well, that middleman's going to be removed in that process very shortly. And I don't think it's going to be specific roles. And as I was saying, it's going to be um, the job of everybody to become prompt engineers and become familiar with using AI tools. It's not going to be a specialized position, is my guess.
Yeah, I think like that's a really good point. When I read the tweets on there won't be prompt engineers, I was at first like baffled and was like, no way that will be prompt engineers. But the more I thought about, and also now like with your explanation, we don't have, like, if you look at job titles, we don't have a Photoshop master. You don't have
Yeah,
a
yeah,
Excel engineer. Like you're in controlling, or you're an art director, and or you're creative director or whatever. And in your resume you could maybe, like, it will be just like you list, I'm proficient in Adobe, in Cinema 4D, and whatever. We will have I'm knowledgeable in using Midjourney or DALI or ChatGPT, or then like if you go deeper down, like ControlNet or LangChain or whatever. And this will be like just, okay, I'm an art director and I am able to use Midjourney in my workflow, but it's not, we won't have Midjourney art direct, like, that's, I think, like a really
Yeah.
good differentiation.
Specialized roles. Yeah, I don't think they will survive very long. It's funny to say a role exclusively created by AI will be one of the first ones to be disrupted by AI. But but yeah, that's my take on it all.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And so we were talking about a couple of the technologies you were just talking about, Beleevens. I kind of wanted to get into this topic, and it was brought up by the community, so I wanted to make sure we touch on it. But we're seeing a trend where there's companies now who are profiting from AI tools and using data, data that maybe they didn't get the consent of artists, that they didn't get consent of the artists of like whose art they're using for their data. Um, how do you see all this working in the future? Do artists have a leg to stand on, or are we just going to have to kind of bow down to these large tech companies and let them kind of run over all of the creative rights of artists?
Want me to jump in and comment on this
Yeah,
one?
yeah. I was kind of leaving that one
Yeah.
towards you because I know I've heard you talk a little bit about it before.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting topic, and I think we are evolving as a set of communities, how we're thinking about this and approaching this. Well, I hope, at least I hope we are. Um, we're certainly trying over here at Alter State Machine, and our approach and the way that we're designing these systems is to have an opt-in method. So if you want to explicitly do something in the style of another artist, let's take, for instance, the art AI, the 2D art AI engine that we've built. We've got a thing called a style filter system. If you want to explicitly use any influence from an artist in what you're producing on the other end, then you've got to request to use their artist style by either owning the artist's NFT, or purchasing the ability to do it on the point, or they could give it away for free. But either way, there needs to be some sort of explicit consent before you do anything, even remotely in their style. So you could mix, 12 different styles from 12 different artists together, but each of those artists will have the opportunity to opt into having that ability. So that's been kind of our approach. I think it's an interesting can of worms to jump into, because so at some point, you say, okay, so an artist might go and look at all the work from a human artist might go and look at all the work from another artist, and then draw inspiration from that, and that's considered derivative art, and that's okay. At what point does that process break down when you include a machine in the process? And I think we're going to see a lot of this play out in the court of laws, and it's going to come down to what the inputs versus the outputs. So I think as far as the outputs go, they would probably be considered derivative works, but the inputs into the AI, that's where it gets a little bit more tricky, for people just scraping data off the internet and training their AIs. So this is definitely going to be a very interesting space to watch, for those people interested in legal outcomes over the next few years as this starts to play out. With things like the music research that we're working on, we're looking at working directly with the rights holders for that, to just avoid not just avoid the whole thing altogether, but also make sure that the people who involved in the creative process are kind of fairly treated, which we think is a better approach than what we've traditionally seen in the AI space, which is take everything and then ask for permission later. So hopefully, we can start a little bit of a trend with working with the people who contributed to the training of the AI in the first place.
Yeah, I think like what's super interesting here is also like the part of like music research, and just like your voice, right? Like when you look at visual art, it might be like the let's make 50 works, you feed it into the AI, and then you can change and alter your image based on that style of the artist, for example. But when it comes to music, I think just recently, like 1 or 2 days ago, a song from Drake and The Weeknd popped off like on all charts, went viral. But it's all AI produced. Like they didn't sing it, they didn't produce it, they didn't do the beats, nothing. But it went viral, and everyone's listening to it. And that is just based on like how their songs work and how their voice sounds. And a few weeks back, we had David Guetta, who used Eminem's voice at a live gig in a concert, um, where he let Eminem like rap something he didn't say. And I think like when it comes down to, okay, your voice is your art, we're in a totally like new space next to, okay, I created visual art, feed it into the AI, and it looks like it. And like, will we get to a point where we all have to patent our voice? Like that's something I do see actually, and will be interesting to see how it evolves.
Yeah, it's a super interesting challenge. I was talking about it with Aaron and a couple of Aaron and Dr. Alex, I think, the other day. We were talking about how we can specifically use AI for this purpose of patenting your voice, essentially, creating a digital signature for your voice. Because that's going to be an important thing. I mean, the poor music industry, they just can't get a break from disruption, can they? Just constant for them. This technology thing has been pretty rough. But as I said, we're trying to work with the rights holders. I think it's an interesting approach, and compared to the other way other sort of AI projects have been approaching it. But I think ultimately that's going to be the way forward, and we just got to hope that the industry is open to working together on this, rather than a lot of industries, when they see disruption on the horizon, the sort of bury your head in the sand um, kind of method of dealing with it has prevailed. Which I don't think is going to serve anybody well in this instance.
Yeah, it's funny timing because I think this weekend was a bit of an inflection point because, celebrity voice matchers have been around for like a decade, and we've had celebrity soundboards and all sorts of different stuff where you could pirate sounds and voices, but they were always just viewed by the industry as cute and one off and kind of gimmicks. But the second that song came out from the Drake and the Weeknd by that unknown artist ghostwriter, it was like, okay, this is good. This is as comparable as a big major release that a record label would pour millions of dollars into, and that changed the conversation almost overnight. And I think already we're seeing them, the attorneys get up and everyone say, okay, now we need to figure this out. So it's funny how fast things change once the quality perception changes.
Yeah, and I think it's a different world as well with the creator economy. We've got, you can make a living with a small crew in a studio on a YouTube channel, right? Or a TikTok channel. You can make a pretty decent living
Totally.
doing that, and these tools have enabled, a massive amount of creative content to get out in the world that was um, restricted by money and capability before, and that capability and the money threshold is just lowering day by day, to a point where it's going to be, you could do a Marvel production movie in your basement. It's essentially where we're driving towards, right? With full AI actors and full AI animation and artwork and everything. I think that's the ultimate, point that we're driving to with this technology. It's not going to stop. It's not going to say, throw its hand up and say, you know what, you know, a, a few mimicking a few artists and creating 2D pictures is good enough. Let's stop developing the technology. No, it's going to keep on going forward until uh, it's uh, um, it's unrecognizable from the top tier production.
Yeah, and I think artists' rights is very top of mind right now. And of course, we all owe it to the artists as their audience and their consumers to protect them. But there's also such thing as creator rights. And we owe it to creators and to the next generation of creators and storytellers to give them the best we can give them in terms of tools and technology. So I'm all for experiments, even when they do break something or piss people off a little bit, as long as they're done with the right intention.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it?
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. I actually brought up No Credits Left. They were the originator of this question and topic. No Credits, do you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to give the panel a bit of background, I've been a photographer for 20 years in New Zealand commercially. I've also been a judge of professional photography, and I worked for 5 or 6 years in the New Zealand Institute of Professional Photography running their annual awards. And the discussion around plagiarism was a massive discussion that went on for years, and sort of every so often rears its head again. And the debates that we would have between our own industry plus getting in people from Australia who have the same issues was really, really interesting to be a part of. And I kind of see this whole topic as an extension of that. On one hand, I totally love your approach, David, where you're just kind of saying, like, let's figure out a way of recompensing artists. If someone's name is used 100,000 times in order to generate a piece of art in their particular style, then potentially there is some kind of reward owing to them. However, I also took what you said earlier on about, I learned my photography by studying other artists and seeing how they did it and being inspired by their style, and then bringing my own flavor to it. And I think the whole world needs to kind of get with the idea that the only difference between this change in technology is the speed in which it's happening. When photography turned up on the scene and artists all around the world said, oh, we're going to be out of a job because we won't have to paint ever again, it took many, many years for that discussion to even take place, let alone suddenly people realized that, oh, maybe this technology will disrupt our industry. Now we're seeing AI change on a weekly basis almost, and it's really just brought everything to the surface much in a much more violent way, which is probably why there's kind of such a knee-jerk reaction from people. Like, you go into a chat room where they're anti-AI art, and it's vitriol, like it's caustic. So I think all it is the speed. It's showing us that actually a computer can reference 100,000 images and create something equally as beautiful very quickly. And people are feeling a bit out of control, perhaps. And we could try and change people's minds, but maybe the approach is what you've just said, which is to just go in with an idea of, okay, well, let's just find a way of paying people whose art is referenced, and leave it at that and move on, because that might actually be the ripping the band-aid off quickly.
Yeah, there's some awesome insights, man. And I think I think the solution is going to be collaboration. And I think you made a really good insight on the fact that the pace of disruption is is the thing that is, it's, it's neck breaking.
Yeah.
Whereas, before you think, the internet was fast, it kind of took over the world in a matter of a decade, changing everybody's lives. This is doing, AI is doing things on a 10x pace to what we experience, the disruption we experience with the internet. So I think that's going to be the challenge for everyone. We're not strangers, especially the generations alive today are not strangers to disruption. It's not a foreign concept to us for the majority of people. It's just the pace of it is it's just dialed up to 11, right?
Yeah, it's a super interesting topic, and people get really passionate about it, and I think it's kind of on us, I guess, as leaders in the space to be wary of the fact that people are going to get emotional about it, and maybe look at a solution rather than an argument. It's going to be almost fruitless trying to bring people up to speed who haven't been. Like I consider myself a complete amateur in the space. It's only because of you guys that I've learned about it. But then you talk to my sister or my dad or my next door neighbor, and they're just so far behind. It's ridiculous. So it's probably that proactive approach of finding a solution rather than trying to convince the world that it's actually not stealing someone's art.
Yeah, and also, for people in AI to stop stealing people's art. I mean, that's probably, that would be nice, nice thing for technologists to do, is to maybe go to the community first, in the first instance, and at least try and start that dialogue. I think there has been a little bit too much liberty in defense of all those people on those creative forums freaking out. I think there's been a bit too much liberty in the ask for permission later kind of concept and approach that that a lot of people in the tech industry have taken to this level of disruption.
Yeah, it's really hard to get respect for creative work. As a creative, I've noticed that corporate people who request my services really it's rare that they request them because of my artistic value. It's like they've got a job they need doing, and they look at me as a tool, like a pool cleaner or a brush for your toilet. And it's really hard for me to then turn up, and then the day that I'm sick, or they choose to go with someone else, and they come back to me and say, "Oh, we really missed you. You should have been on that job." It's like, well, it's because that is the element that I bring to my art, is me and the way I see the world. And you have 100 photographers in one place taking photos, you'll get 101 different photos. Like everyone sees the world differently, and yet there's this kind of aversion to wanting to value someone else's way of seeing the world when it comes to recompensing with finance. They just want to keep it as cost effective as possible and move on, and so it's always going to be a kind of an arm wrestle.
Yeah.
But thanks for the conversation. It's really, really interesting.
I mean, thanks for jumping on board. Yeah, it's great insights. And next time we do one of these, probably should have you up and dive in a little bit deeper.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
thanks,
yeah, that was an awesome perspective. Thanks for sharing. And with that, I'd like to also welcome up people from the community. If you want to come up and ask questions of our guests, put your hand up, and we will get you up here shortly. Beleevens, did you have kind of a sidebar to this topic a little bit that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, so there's one part that's quite interesting to me, and the opinion of the panel here. How should AI be censored? So what I mean by that is, when you talk with ChatGPT and you have a conversation and you touch upon certain topics, it will just say, So for example, if you asked for stuff about alcohol, which is not like now directly tied to creative workflow, but just to give you an example, it will respond with as an AI language model, I cannot promote drinking, so I cannot answer this question. And this like OpenAI has now like the control to define, okay, what should it be capable of answering, and as soon as stuff like that is limited, I fear that it also takes away a bit of like creative freedom if every second answer is I'm not allowed to answer. What's your take on this, maybe David, on like censoring AI depending on guidelines of the platform that releases it?
Yep. So I'm gonna make a statement that I think that some level of censorship is important because of the things you can do with it. So the average person probably shouldn't be able to go in and say, give me the gene sequence for smallpox and the method for synthesizing it in my basement. I think we can all agree with that. That's probably a bad thing. Or how to create a nuclear bomb in my basement or something like that. I think we can all agree, okay, yes, there are certain things that we should not allow everybody access to potentially, but that level of intervention is going to be the thing that's going to be debated. And that's the tricky point, is what level of censorship do you have? And my kind of view on it is that it's going to be a case by case basis, and it's going to be application dependent. So me and Carmen have recently adopted a 7-year-old, and we censor the content he's exposed to a great degree. He's got YouTube for kids, and we monitor, what he's got on his iPad and all that sort of stuff. So that's an example of a great deal of censorship. And if I was going to give him access to an AI tool, I would want a certain amount of control over what he can and cannot ask it and what kind of responses it might give to him. So that's application specific censorship. But if you're in a research facility and you're you are researching dangerous diseases, then you might want your AI to be able to give you meaningful responses on that. And in that application, then you're going to want certain censorship controls removed. So I think there's going to be a spectrum of requirements as far as censorship goes, and they're going to be application specific, and it's going to be a really tricky space to navigate for anybody building applications in this space. The delicate balance between freedom and safety has always been an issue with technology, and that's definitely not going to go away. So I mean, you also got to keep in mind, the tools that are available now, they're early proofs of concept. This is not what AI is going to be. This is not the endpoint. So I think people, in all fairness to the guys over at OpenAI, I think they've been cautious, which is probably a good approach, as opposed to being reckless when it comes to this stuff. So in this early concept where we're just finding out how people are going to use it and react to it, I would probably recommend a cautious approach rather than a reckless approach when it comes to this stuff.
That seems like a reasonable way to go about it, and I agree. I think you want to be more cautious with new technologies like this than just kind of throwing caution to the wind. AGM, I saw you raise your hand. You're up on stage. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I think Beleevens kind of just got a bit ahead of my question on that. So it's kind of maybe an extension of what Beleevens was bringing up. Because I really enjoy playing around with AI art and been doing it for probably about a year and a half, and do a lot of stuff just for fun. And the other day I was on Midjourney, and I was just having fun creating cyberpunk versions of different world leaders, and suddenly found myself getting my account banned for trying to do a cyberpunk version of President Modi of India and a cyberpunk version of Xi Jinping from China. And I kind of like I believe artists will, take new tools and just adapt, right? Photography didn't kill art and Photoshop didn't kill art. People take these new tools and just adapt them. But it's interesting to have a tool that an artist can use, which, a camera doesn't control what you take a picture of, right? And Photoshop doesn't control what you create an image of, right? The artist still has a lot of leeway in that.
I might just jump in there quickly on that, because one thing Photoshop does do, it won't let you copy money. So there is some of those controls in there that have been around for a while to prevent you from doing things like that. So it's not unheard of that tools have some inbuilt censorship. But I do follow up with your point. Sorry to interrupt.
I didn't know that with Photoshop. I've never tried copying money.
Yeah, give it a go. It'll yeah.
Anyway,
well, don't give it a go.
Trying to get them on a list or
on
something.
The FBI knocking on your door.
Anyways, I guess maybe you've already spoken a bit to my question, but really I was just wondering like your thoughts on how this will affect, the creative arts and expression, and how it should affect an artist's expression, because we will see situations where, or we already see situations where people are creating outputs that can be deceptive and misleading, and they're very persuasive. But there's also a role of artists to kind of critique society, and art has a very important role in kind of political speech as well. And it just kind of struck me how powerful it was when I got banned from Midjourney as a tool to influence that.
Yeah,
so
I think it's going to come down to application specific. I mean, you wouldn't go to Adobe stock images for politically thought-provoking images, right? That application is not for that purpose. And I think things like Midjourney, that might be the Adobe Photoshop, Adobe stock photos repository of AI and creation of AI images, and you'll probably see applications pop up that are have a bit less censorship, where you would go for that sort of thing. That's kind of how I see the landscape evolving. As I said, the tools that we have now are just sort of early prototypes of what you're going to see coming out, and you'll find certain tools will be used for certain things, and I don't think you would go to Midjourney to create those kinds of images. You would probably go to another application that somebody else has built specifically to be anti-censorship for that sort of stuff.
I think,
or build it yourself.
I think what we do need is a lot of transparency around what is and isn't allowed from these private companies, because realistically, these private companies can make the rules that they want to do, and then we can vote with our time and whether we don't want to use it or not. But some companies need to raise their hand and say, hey, we've taken money from the Chinese government, so we are going to abide by their rules, or just to be more straightforward and let everyone get on the same page and not have to find out after they've already been banned.
Yeah, good point. I agree with that.
Yep, same.
Can I ask, do you think it is, for developing different applications, is it cost prohibitive in terms of like the amount of training that is required?
So you could go right now and pick up Stability AI, go to Hugging Face and get a model, a Stability AI model, and spool up your own instance on your own computer right now and generate whatever you want. There's a whole bunch of online guides on how to do that. And it's not, as long as you've got a computer that can run it, it's not particularly cost prohibitive to do the inference. To train these models from scratch, that's where the massive cost comes into play. That's where you need a whole bunch of computing power in order to train them. But on the inference side, it's pretty light in comparison.
There's actually also like if you talk about ChatGPT, you can check out GPT for All, where you can download the client, run it locally. There are different models, trained models, which you can use. It's about 4 gigabytes of like the model size. And so you can also run it locally. Of course, the quality is not as good as ChatGPT with like Model 4. But we will definitely get there that you can just run it locally and don't have API costs or anything.
Yeah. So these so right now there's alternatives to these tools where you can just go and create your own instances and be completely untethered from the censorship of the other companies.
Awesome. Thank you. You've given me a new ideas to go play with.
Yeah. Good luck. Have fun.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for answering.
No problem.
So I have another question, maybe to Dylan. Creative world building, with, like you mentioned, you work like with the party bears and all like the animation tools. How do we get to a point where we can just prompt to 3D worlds? Recently we had there was a demo for anyone who wasn't there. I was really impressive what Improbable was showcasing. So Improbable, who are building like the other side, they're working on so-called MML, Metaverse Markup Language, where you can generate 3D models just with text, just like HTML, but for 3D worlds. And what they showed was a speech to text to 3D model. So they interpret what you say and generate a 3D model from that. So yeah, what do you think? What's your take on world building with AI?
I think the job for virtual architect is going to definitely be a thing in the future. I think there's a lot of tools already kind of in early experimentation where you can do this. David can talk more to the technical kind of feasibility of it, but it's a problem that's been figured out. Roblox and UGC companies like that are kind of the tip of the spear. David and his team have a lot going on in that category, so I'll kind of let him share what he can. But, it started about a decade ago with procedural generation of grass and forests and stuff like that, that were essentially just repetitive patterns with slight tweaks. But we're already at a point where you're going to be able to create an infinite amount of one 3D assets to kind of customize your world. And that's going to be super exciting. And I think a very young generation is already grown up on this. So they're going to take it to a next level that's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. I mean, definitely the tools that we've been working on have this kind of thing in mind, where you'll be able to go into a world and say, I want to build a house, and these are all the things that I want. This is the style I want the house in, and this is um, the NPCs I want the house populated with, and this is the story and narrative that I'm trying to say, or it's connected to this story and narrative, and then have that all not procedurally, but AI generated for you on the spot. That's kind of the space that we're researching it in at the moment. So we have things like AI 3D model generation that were built to do that, and AI motion generation, which is another pretty important thing, is to be able to have real-time motion for the objects and characters that you generate, which is a space that needs to be solved. So there's a bunch of small research things that need to be solved before we get to that point where we can use these tools and have them in an experience available for people to create whatever their minds imagine. But it's not going to be long before those tools are available for people to consume.
That's awesome. I wanna be respectful of everyone's time here, and we're near the end. So I wanna put one more question out to each of you, which would be, what advice would you give to creatives who are interested in incorporating AI into their work? Maybe people who have never touched AI or who are just kind of to start to dabble. Like, what advice would you give them?
Well, play around with the tools. Don't be shy to download them yourself. So get out there and get a version of Stable Diffusion and get some of these other tools that allow you to play around and tweak the actual open source systems and models yourself. That's probably a good starting point. They will give you an understanding of how they work and kind of make you ahead of the curve a little bit, as opposed to just using the tools that are out there and published online. I think it's worth the extra effort to sit down and read the information, go on the GitHubs, watch the videos, tutorials on how to set these things up and get them working for yourself.
Yeah, I would just add that if you want to kind of laser focus on any niche, there's tons of new tools. I use Futurepedia as like an ongoing catalog. They're adding 20 to 30 tools almost every day now, and you could really go down specific angles. And the other kind of recommendation I'd make is to have an idea of what you want to create before you start using the AI. So you don't want to just use the AI just to use the AI, because then oftentimes I find people come away with like, oh, it wasn't as powerful as I thought it'd be, or oh, I couldn't do anything too cool. But if you have a specific goal in mind, you want to create X image or Y world, you'll find it's a lot more powerful and kind of mind blowing in what it can do when you know what you want to create.
Yeah, I think like it's that's really good advice. And one thing I would add is probably to follow the right people on Twitter, because there is a massive bunch of people experimenting, playing around with the different models. Now that Twitter algorithm at its best, my feed turns more and more into AI content from Web3 to AI. And I feel like every single day there is a massive thread on a new development in the space, and someone who came up with something new, like recently a ChatGPT generated language to compress data into a smaller text. And so yeah, I think like just follow, look for people on Twitter, interact with them, ask questions. And there are so many brilliant minds around. That's the advice I would give.
Awesome. That is really great advice. And on that note, thank you everyone for joining. Thanks for everyone for showing up. We can continue the conversation in the Discord if you want to keep chatting. Maybe Beleevens will share some of his top Twitter follows. But thanks again, everyone. And Beleevens, thanks for staying up so late with us. Cheers, guys.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.